Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. You students of the Civil War need no introduction to the man pictured here. Jubal Anderson Early, the West Point class of 1837 graduate who joined the Confederate Army and became one of General Robert E. Lee's most tenacious commanders. In 1863, during the Gettysburg Campaign, he and his corps captured the city of York, Pennsylvania, one of the northernmost advances of the entire war. In 1867, his stubborn defense of the Shenandoah Valley diverted Union forces away from Lee's army of Northern Virginia. In July 1864, Early led a raid into Maryland, remembered for the Battle of the Monocacy, and onto the outskirts of Washington, D.C., where he and his men came within a heartbeat of entering the capital city when his troops threatened Fort Stevens. A stray shot during that action came perilously close to striking President Abraham Lincoln, who had rode out from the White House, curious to see what a battle was like. Well, Early wrote about his experiences in his 1867 book, A Memoir of the Last Year of the War for Independence in the Confederate States of America. The title alone tells you how he felt. As I always do in books from the period, I flipped to the preface to get Early's introductory remarks. They reveal that 2 years after the war, his feelings about the United States and his decision to join the South had not changed one single iota. It's an interesting read, and I want to read a few excerpts from what he wrote. So here we go. He starts, under a solemn sense of duty to my unhappy country and to the brave soldiers who fought under me, as well as to myself, the following pages have been written. When the question of practical secession from the United States arose, as a citizen of the state of Virginia and a member of the convention called by the authority of the legislature of that state, I opposed secession with all the ability I possessed, with the hope that the horrors of civil war might be averted and that a returning sense of duty and justice on the part of the masses of the northern states would induce them to respect the rights of the people of the South. While some northern politicians and editors who subsequently took rank among the most unscrupulous and vindictive of our enemies, and now hold me to be a traitor and rebel, were openly and seditiously justifying and encouraging secession, I was laboring honestly and earnestly to preserve the Union. As a member of the Virginia Convention, I voted against the ordinance of secession on its passage by that body, with the hope that even then the collision of arms might be avoided and some satisfactory adjustment arrived at. The adoption of that ordinance wrung from me bitter tears of grief, but I at once recognized my duty to abide the decision of my native state and to defend her soil against invasion. Any scruples which I may have entertained as to the right of secession were soon dispelled by the mad, wicked, and unconstitutional measures of the authorities at Washington and the frenzied clamor of the people of the North for war upon their former brethren of the South. I then, and ever since, have regarded Abraham Lincoln, his counselors and supporters, as the real traitors who had overthrown the Constitution and government of the United States and established, in lieu thereof, an odious despotism. And this opinion I entered on the journal of the convention when I signed the ordinance of secession. I recognized the right of resistance and revolution as exercised by our fathers in 1776, and without cavil as to the name of which it was called, I entered the military service of my state willingly, cheerfully, and zealously. When the state of Virginia became one of the Confederate states and her troops were turned over to the Confederate government, I embraced the cause of the whole Confederacy with equal ardor and continued in the service with the determination to devote all the energy and talent I possessed to the common defense. I fought through the entire war without once regretting the course I had pursued, with an abiding faith in the justice of our cause, and I never saw the moment when I would have been willing to consent to any compromise or settlement short of the absolute independence of my country. It was my fortune to participate in most of the great military operations in which the Army in Virginia was engaged, both before and after General Lee assumed command. In the last year of the momentous struggle, I commanded at different times a Division II Corps of General Lee's army in the campaign from the Rapidan to James River, and subsequently a separate force which marched into Maryland, threatened Washington City, and then went through an eventful campaign in the Valley of Virginia. In regard to my own services, all I have to say is that I have the consciousness of having done my duty to my country to the very best of my ability, and whatever may be my fate, I would not exchange that consciousness for untold millions. I have come into exile rather than submit to the yoke of the oppressors of my country, and I have never thought of attributing aught of blame or censure to those true men who, after having nobly done their duty in the dreadful struggle through which we passed, now that it has gone against us, remain to share the misfortunes of their people and to aid and comfort them in their trials. On the contrary, I appreciate and honor their motives. I have not sought refuge in another land from insensibility to the wrongs and sufferings of my own country, but I feel deeply and continually for them, and could my life secure the redemption of that country as it has been often risked, so now it would be as freely given for that object. There were men born and nurtured in the southern states, and some of them in my own state, who took sides with our enemies and aided in desolating and humiliating the land of their own birth and of the graves of their ancestors. Some of them rose to high positions in the United States Army, and others to high civil positions. I envy them not their dearly bought prosperity. I had rather be the humblest private soldier who fought in the ranks of the Confederate Army and now, maimed and disabled, hobbles on his crutches from house to house to receive his daily bread from the hands of grateful women whose homes he had fought for, than the highest of those renegades and traitors. Let them enjoy the advantages of their present positions as best they may, for the deep and bitter execrations of an entire people now attend them, and an immortality of infamy awaits them. As for all the enemies who have overrun or aided in overrunning my country, there is a wide and impassable gulf between us, in which I see the blood of slaughtered friends, comrades, and countrymen, which all the waters and the firmament above and the seas beneath cannot wash away. Some strong words by Jubal Early. The anger he felt in 1867, as revealed in these words, they came at an interesting time. Notice the references that he was potentially being accused as a rebel and a traitor and a criminal. Certainly, you had the death of Wirtz from Andersonville. You had the imprisonment of Jefferson Davis. Early's fate and many of the other senior generals was very much in doubt. Of course, Early did not serve any time in prison, was not overall held accountable for his defection from the United States and his embracing of the Southern cause. In fact, he played a big part in the lost cause narrative that rose after the war. He held his anger and grievances all the way to his death in the 1890s. But thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.